Welcome to Poirot's Mysteries. I'm your host, Nolan Drake, and tonight we invite you to step into the opulent, shadowed world of 1920s England, where elegance masks treachery. Settle into your favourite armchair, perhaps with a cup of tea or under the soft glow of a lamp, and prepare for a tale of deception and deduction. Murder at the Shadow Court. Before we begin, dear listeners, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? A cosy cottage, a bustling city flat, or perhaps a train rattling through the night? Let's step into the mystery together. Chapter 1. Introduction and Setup. In the heart of Sussex, where the hills rolled like emerald waves under a November sky, stood Shadow Court, a manor that seemed to whisper secrets with every creak of its ancient timbers. Its ivy-clad towers pierced the dusk, catching the last amber rays of a setting sun, while its leaded windows gleamed like watchful eyes. The estate was the domain of Sir Reginald Hawthorne, a retired diplomat whose wealth was rivalled only by his reputation for hosting gatherings that blended London's glittering elite with the quiet dignity of country gentry. This weekend, Shadow Court was alive with the hum of anticipation. Its halls prepared for a soirée that promised laughter, fine wine, and unbeknownst to its guests a darkness waiting to unfold. Enter Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective whose moustache was as meticulously groomed as his mind was sharp. Invited by Sir Reginald for what was billed as a rare weekend of leisure, Poirot arrived in a sleek motor car, his friend Captain Arthur Hastings at his side. Hastings, ever the earnest companion, marvelled at the estate's grandeur, his eyes wide as they passed through wrought-iron gates flanked by stone lions. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a soft melody laced with amusement, "you admire the beauty, but I, Hercule Poirot, observe the shadows. Even in repose, the little grey cells, they remain vigilant." The guests assembling at Shadow Court were a tapestry of motives and secrets, each a thread in the intricate puzzle Poirot would soon unravel. Sir Reginald had curated his company with care, though whether for camaraderie or calculation, none could say, as Poirot and Hastings were ushered into the grand foyer, where a chandelier cast prisms of light across marble floors. The detective's keen eyes took in the arriving party, noting every glance, every gesture, every hint of unease. First was Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, Sir Reginald's younger sister, a widow of 45, whose elegance was tempered by a sharp tongue and sharper gaze. Her dark silk gown rustled as she greeted guests with a smile that never reached her eyes. She had lived at Shadow Court since her husband's death, her fortune tied to the estate's inheritance, which Sir Reginald controlled with an iron hand. Whispers among the staff suggested Eleanor resented her brother's authority, her independence curtailed by his refusal to release her share of their family's wealth. Could her poised exterior hide a simmering grudge? Next was Dr. Victor Langston, the family physician, a man of reserved demeanour whose grey eyes seemed to guard 1,000 secrets. His medical practice in London had faltered years ago under rumours of a professional disgrace, a patient's death under questionable circumstances. Sir Reginald, it was said, had learned of this scandal and held it over Langston like a sword. As the doctor adjusted his cufflinks, Poirot noted the faint tremor in his hands, a sign of nerves or something deeper. Miss Clara Beaumont, Sir Reginald's fiancée, swept into the foyer like a star taking the stage. A celebrated actress of 28, her golden curls and radiant smile masked an ambition as fierce as her beauty. Her engagement to Sir Reginald had raised eyebrows, not least because it secured her a life of wealth, but only if the marriage took place. Clara's laughter echoed, yet Poirot observed her glance towards Sir Reginald, a mix of adoration and calculation. Did her heart belong to the man or his fortune? Mr. Julian Travers, a stockbroker and Sir Reginald's financial adviser, arrived with a strained smile. His boyish charm was overshadowed by a nervous habit of tugging at his collar, as if the weight of his responsibilities pressed upon him. Sir Reginald had entrusted Travers with vast sums, but recent whispers of risky investments gone awry suggested the broker's star was falling. Had Sir Reginald discovered mismanagement, and if so, what price would Travers pay to keep it hidden? Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, the housekeeper, moved silently through the bustle, her severe black dress and tightly pinned hair a stark contrast to the guests' finery. A fixture at Shadow Court for decades, her loyalty to the Hawthorne family was legendary, yet her eyes held a quiet bitterness. Years ago, Sir Reginald had dismissed her son from the estate's staff for a minor infraction, a wound that festered in her heart. As she directed maids with a curt nod, Poirot wondered what secrets her devotion concealed. Finally, Colonel Marcus Reed, a retired military man and Sir Reginald's old friend, strode in with the bearing of a soldier. Though his ruddy face betrayed a fondness for brandy, a gambling debt had recently strained his finances, and Sir Reginald's refusal to loan him funds had sparked a heated argument overheard by a footman. Reed's jovial laugh rang out, but Poirot noted the tightness in his jaw when Sir Reginald clapped him on the shoulder. As the guests gathered in the oak-panelled dining hall, where candlelight danced on silver and crystal, the air grew thick with unspoken tensions. Sir Reginald, resplendent in a tailored suit, raised a glass to toast the evening, his voice booming with confidence. "To friends, family, and the pleasures of Shadow Court," he declared, his eyes sweeping the room. But Poirot, seated at the far end, observed the chiasse undercurrents. Lady Eleanor's tight smile as she sipped her wine, Travers's fingers drumming on the table, Clara's overly bright laughter, and Langston's gaze fixed on his plate. Mrs. Fowler hovered near the door, her expression unreadable, while Colonel Reed's toast was a touch too hearty. Dinner progressed with exquisite courses: roast pheasant, creamed asparagus, and a decadent chocolate soufflé. But Poirot's attention was on the human drama. A fleeting exchange caught his ear. Clara whispered to Sir Reginald about a letter that troubled her, and his dismissive wave suggested irritation. Lady Eleanor, overhearing, pursed her lips, while Travers spilled a drop of wine, his hand unsteady. Was it merely nerves, Poirot wondered, or the first ripple of a coming storm? As the evening drew to a close, the guests retired to the drawing-room for brandy and cards, but Poirot lingered in the hall, his fingers tracing the carved banister. Hastings, ever loyal, joined him, his brow furrowed. "Something's amiss, isn't it, Poirot?" he ventured. The detective's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. "Oui, mon ami. In a house such as this, where wealth and secrets intertwine, the stage is set for tragedy. We must watch, and we must listen." The clock in the foyer chimed 10, its notes echoing through the silent corridors of Shadow Court. Outside, a wind stirred the trees, casting shadows that danced like spectres across the walls. Poirot adjusted his tie, his mind already turning. The little grey cells, poised for the mystery that awaited. Chapter 2. The crime discovered. The great clock in the foyer of Shadow Court had just tolled midnight. its solemn chimes reverberating through the silent corridors, when a scream pierced the stillness, sharp and chilling as a winter wind. Captain Arthur Hastings, roused from a light doze in his guest room, threw on a dressing gown and stumbled into the dimly lit hallway. The scream came again, high and frantic, from the direction of Sir Reginald Hawthorne's study. As Hastings hurried forward, his heart pounding, he found Miss Clara Beaumont, Sir Reginald's radiant fiancée, standing outside the study door, her face pale as moonlight, her hands trembling as she clutched her silk shawl. "Oh, Captain Hastings!" she cried, her voice breaking. "It's dreadful, Sir Reginald. He's dead." Her words dissolved into sobs, and Hastings, ever the gentleman, steadied her as other guests began to emerge, drawn by the commotion. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne appeared, her nightgown hastily covered by a velvet robe, her eyes sharp despite the hour. Dr. Victor Langston followed, his medical bag already in hand, his expression unreadable. Mr. Julian Travers, the stockbroker, hovered at the edge of the group, his face flushed, while Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, the housekeeper, stood rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. Colonel Marcus Reed, still in his dinner jacket, pushed forward, demanding, "What's happened here?" The study door was locked, its heavy oak unyielding. Hastings rattled the handle, but it held fast. "We must get inside," he urged, looking to Clara. She shook her head, tears streaming. "I heard a thud, then nothing. I tried the door. It's locked from the inside." The windows, visible through the hall's leaded panes, were bolted shut, their iron frames glinting in the moonlight. An impossible crime, Hastings thought, his mind racing. At that moment, Hercule Poirot appeared, his small frame immaculate even at this hour, his moustache perfectly waxed, his eyes gleaming with quiet intensity. "Calm yourselves, mes amis," he said, his voice a soothing balm amid the chaos. "Order and method shall reveal the truth." He approached the door, his fingers brushing the lock as he murmured, "A locked room, oui, but no room is truly impregnable to the little grey cells." With Colonel Reed's assistance, the door was forced open, its hinges groaning in protest. The study revealed a scene of stark contrast to the evening's elegance. Sir Reginald Hawthorne lay slumped across his mahogany desk, a jewelled dagger from his prized collection plunged deep into his chest. Blood stained his crisp white shirt, pooling on the polished wood. The room was otherwise pristine, its bookshelves orderly, its fireplace glowing faintly with dying embers. A glass of brandy had spilled, its amber liquid seeping into the carpet, and a curious smudge of red wax marred the desk's edge. Most perplexing, the key to the study was found in Sir Reginald's pocket, ruling out any simple exit by the killer. Poirot's gaze swept the room, his mind cataloguing every detail. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, "a crime of precision, yet cloaked in impossibility." He knelt beside the body, noting the dagger's ornate handle bore no fingerprints, wiped clean with care. The windows, as Clara had said, were bolted from within, their latches untampered. Yet Poirot's sharp eyes caught a faint scratch on one bolt, barely visible in the lamplight. In the fireplace, a half-burned letter smouldered, its edges charred but fragments legible. Words like debts and betrayal stood out, hinting at a motive rooted in secrets. The household gathered in the doorway, their faces a gallery of shock, fear, and suspicion. Lady Eleanor clutched her pearls, her voice icy. "Who could do such a thing?" she demanded, though her eyes darted to Clara, who sobbed anew. Dr. Langston, stepping forward, checked Sir Reginald's pulse with clinical detachment, shaking his head. "He's been dead perhaps an hour," he said, his tone flat. Travers stammered, I saw him at 10 discussing investments. He was fine then," Mrs. Fowler whispered of a curse on Shadow Court, her hands twisting her apron, while Colonel Reed barked, "We must call the police at once." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the clamour. "The police? Oui. But first, we establish the facts. When was Sir Reginald last seen alive? Who had access to this dagger? Why this letter half destroyed?" His questions hung in the air, each guest's response vague or evasive. Clara claimed she'd been in the conservatory, drawn to the study only by the thud. Lady Eleanor insisted she was in her room, reading. Travers swore he'd retired early, as did Langston and Reed. Mrs. Fowler admitted to passing the study while overseeing the maids, but saw nothing amiss. Their alibis, Poirot noted, were as fragile as the burned paper in the grate. He turned to the red wax smudge, his fingers hovering over it. "Curieux," he murmured, "this wax, it is not from the candles here." Hastings, peering over his shoulder, suggested a secret passage, but Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami, the answer lies not in theatrics but in logic." He straightened, his gaze sweeping the group. "This is murder, mes amis, and the truth hides within these walls. We shall find it together." The wind howled outside, rattling the windows as if Shadow Court itself mourned its master. Poirot's calm resolve steadied the group, but suspicion lingered, a shadow darker than the night. Chapter 3. Investigation begins. The air in Shadow Court hung heavy with suspicion, as dawn broke over the Sussex hills, casting pale light through the manor's leaded windows. The police had been summoned, but Hercule Poirot, ever the master of order and method, wasted no time. In the drawing room, where the fire crackled softly, he gathered the household, his small frame commanding attention. "Mes amis," he said, his eyes glinting like polished steel. "A crime has been committed, and the truth lies in the details. The little grey cells, they are already at work." Captain Arthur Hastings, seated nearby, marvelled at his friend's calm, though his own nerves jangled from the night's horror. Poirot began with interviews. His questions sharp, yet delivered with a disarming courtesy that coaxed truths from guarded lips. First was Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, Sir Reginald's sister, who sat ramrod straight, her widow's black stark against the room's plush velvet. "I was in my room, reading," she declared. But when Poirot pressed for the book's title, her hesitation was palpable. "A novel? Something French?" she said vaguely, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief. Poirot noted her unease, wondering if her resentment over the family inheritance, Sir Reginald's control had left her financially tethered, hid a darker intent. Dr. Victor Langston, the physician, was next, his grey eyes steady, but his hands betraying a faint tremor as he adjusted his spectacles. He admitted visiting Sir Reginald at 9 to discuss a private matter, but refused to elaborate. "A patient's confidence," he said curtly. Poirot's gaze lingered on the doctor's medical bag, left open on a side table, revealing vials and a syringe. Could a sedative have played a role in the murder? Langston's past scandal, whispered among the staff, loomed large. Had Sir Reginald threatened to expose it? Miss Clara Beaumont, the actress and Sir Reginald's fiancée, entered in a swirl of silk, her eyes red from crying, yet artfully made up. She claimed she'd been in the conservatory, admiring the orchids when she heard the fatal thud. Yet Poirot noticed faint traces of the study's burgundy carpet fibres on her satin shoes. A detail she dismissed with a nervous laugh. "I must have passed through earlier," she said. Her motive seemed tied to her engagement, a marriage that would secure her wealth, but Poirot wondered if her tears were for love or a loss of fortune. Mr. Julian Travers, the stockbroker, fidgeted under Poirot's scrutiny, his boyish face pale. He admitted meeting Sir Reginald at 10 to discuss investments, but insisted all was well. He was in good spirits, Travers stammered, though a bead of sweat betrayed him. Poirot learned from a maid that Sir Reginald had recently audited Travers's ledgers, uncovering heavy losses. Had a confrontation pushed the adviser to desperation? Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, the housekeeper, spoke with quiet defiance, her hands clasped tightly. She'd been overseeing the maids near the study but saw nothing unusual. Yet Poirot caught a flicker of bitterness when she mentioned Sir Reginald's dismissal of her son years ago, a wound that had never healed. Her loyalty to Shadow Court was unquestioned, but was it a mask for vengeance? Colonel Marcus Reed, the military man, was gruff, claiming he'd been in the billiard room, fetching a cigar at the time of the murder. A footman, however, reported seeing him near the study just before Clara's scream. Reed's gambling debts and Sir Reginald's refusal to help gave him ample motive. His bluster, Poirot noted, seemed a shield for guilt or fear. With interviews complete, Poirot turned to physical clues. He revisited the study where the jewelled dagger lay under police guard. Its handle, wiped clean, suggested a calculated killer. The red wax smudge on the desk intrigued him most. It matched a candle in the library, but no one admitted to using it that night. "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "This wax, it tells a story." The half-burned letter in the fireplace, with its fragments of debts and betrayal, hinted at financial or personal treachery. But whose? Hastings, ever eager, suggested a secret passage behind the bookshelves. Poirot smiled indulgently. "Non, mon ami, the solution is not so theatrical. The locked room, it is a puzzle of logic." He examined the windows, finding one bolt with a faint scratch, suggesting tampering. Could it have been manipulated from outside? The key in Sir Reginald's pocket ruled out a simple exit, but Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. "The killer," he said, "wished us to believe the room impenetrable. Yet every lock has its flaw." As he paced the study, Poirot's gaze fell on a small detail. A single orchid petal, vibrant purple, near the desk. It matched the conservatory's blooms, where Clara claimed to have been. Was it a clue or a coincidence? He tucked it into his notebook, his expression unreadable. "We collect the pieces, Hastings," he said, "and soon the picture will emerge." The household dispersed, their alibis fragile, their secrets thicker than the morning mist outside. Poirot stood by the window, watching the sun climb over the hills, his little grey cells weaving connections. "This murder," he told Hastings, "is a tapestry of motives, each thread leading to the truth. We must pull carefully." Chapter 4. Clues and Red Herrings. Poirot began by revisiting the suspects, probing deeper into their stories. A maid, trembling under his gentle questioning, revealed she'd seen Shigdaksh, Colonel Marcus Reed Chestau, lingering near the study door shortly before Clara Beaumont's scream, clutching a cigar case as if it were a lifeline. When confronted, Reed blustered, "I was merely fetching a cigar from the billiard room. The maid's mistaken." Yet Poirot noted the Colonel's cigar case, found later in the drawing room, was full. Why venture near the study? Reed's gambling debts and Sir Reginald's refusal to bail him out cast a long shadow over his alibi. Another clue surfaced in the library, where the red wax smudge on the study desk found its match. A thick library candle, its wick blackened, bore traces of the same crimson wax. Yet no one admitted to using it the night of the murder. Mrs. Beatrice Fowler Shaw, the housekeeper, was questioned again, her severe demeanour faltering when Poirot pointed out a faint wax stain on her apron. "I polish the candelabras daily," she said sharply. "It's nothing unusual." But Poirot's arched eyebrows suggested otherwise. Had she been in the study, or was the wax a clever distraction? A tantalizing lead emerged when Hastings, exploring the estate's manicured gardens, found a torn silk scarf near the study's exterior window, its delicate blue threads catching on a rosebush. "An outsider!" Hastings exclaimed, envisioning a shadowy intruder. Poirot examined the scarf, noting its fine weave matched none of the guests' attire. "A red herring, perhaps," he mused, "planted to mislead." A quick inquiry with the staff confirmed the scarf belonged to a former maid, dismissed weeks ago, ruling out an external killer. The clue, though dramatic, was a dead end, designed to divert attention from the household. The study, Poirot uncovered a more substantial find. Sir Reginald's safe, hidden behind a portrait, stood ajar. Inside were bijoux. Mr. Julian Travers. Financial ledgers, marked with red ink, evidence of catastrophic investments that had cost Sir Reginald thousands. Travers, when questioned, turned ashen. "He was going to ruin me," he admitted, his voice low. "He threatened to expose my losses unless I repaid him." The ledgers confirmed a motive, but Poirot wondered if Travers's panic was too obvious. A beacon meant to distract from subtler guilt. Miss Clara Beaumont adieu drew suspicion when Poirot re-examined her claim of being in the conservatory. The orchid petal found near the desk was indeed from Shadow Court's rare purple blooms, but Clara's shoes, already suspect for their carpet fibres, now revealed a faint smear of potting soil. "I told you, I was among the flowers," she insisted, her actress's poise cracking under Poirot's gaze. Yet the petal's placement, near the desk, not the door, suggested it had been carried in deliberately. Was Clara hiding a visit to the study, or had someone planted the petal to implicate her? A false lead complicated matters further. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne reported hearing a ghostly moan from the study around midnight, fueling Mrs. Fowler's talk of a curse. Poirot, ever practical, traced the sound to a loose shutter near the study window, its creak mimicking a human cry in the wind. "The supernatural, it does not kill," he told Hastings, dismissing the tale but noting Lady Eleanor's eagerness to spread it. Was she deflecting suspicion from her own resentment over the inheritance? Dr. Victor Langston offered another puzzle. A footman recalled seeing him in the hall near the study at 10, carrying his medical bag. When Poirot inspected it, he found a vial of sedative, its label worn but intact. Langston claimed it was for a guest's insomnia, but Poirot's mind turned to the spilled brandy on Sir Reginald's desk. Could it have been laced? The doctor's guarded demeanour and rumoured scandal made him a figure of interest, though his calm suggested confidence or cunning. As the clues mounted, Poirot cautioned Hastings. "The obvious clue, mon ami, is often the false one. We must sift the truth from the deception." He returned to the study's window, re-examining the scratched bolt. Using a magnifying glass, he confirmed the scratch was fresh, suggesting a tool, perhaps a wire, had manipulated the bolt from outside, creating the locked room illusion. Yet the precision required pointed to a killer with skill and nerve, narrowing the field but not yet revealing the culprit. The suspects, now restless, watched Poirot with a mix of fear and defiance. Shadow Court's grandeur seemed to mock their secrets, its halls echoing with unspoken accusations. Poirot, undeterred, sketched a mental map of motives and means, his little grey cells weaving a net to catch the truth. "We are close, Hastings," he said softly, "but the killer plays a clever game." Community engagement. Narration. Red herrings abound, dear listeners. The torn scarf, the wax-stained apron, the orchid petal. Which clue do you trust? Is one of our suspects too obvious? Or is Poirot missing something? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's see if you're ahead of his little grey cells as we unravel the secrets of Shadow Court. Chapter 5. Complications and Twists. The investigation at Shadow Court took a darker turn as the second day dawned, the Sussex Manor's grandeur now overshadowed by the spectre of murder. Hercule Poirot, his moustache as precise as his thoughts, paced the drawing room, his little grey cells grappling with a web of clues and deceptions. The locked study, the jewelled dagger, the red wax smudge, and the orchid petal had painted a complex picture, but new complications and startling twists threatened to unravel his progress. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever loyal, watched his friend with growing unease, sensing the case was no longer a simple puzzle. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low, "the truth hides behind a curtain of lies, but we shall draw it back." A shocking twist emerged when Poirot re-examined the half-burned letter from the study's fireplace. Painstakingly piecing together its charred fragments, he deciphered a chilling phrase: "Clara must not know the truth, or she too will suffer." The letter in Sir Reginald Hawthorne's hand suggested a second victim was targeted, Miss Clara Beaumont, his fiancée. Yet Clara, when confronted, paled and claimed ignorance. "A letter? I know nothing of it," she insisted, her actress's poise faltering. Poirot noted her missing engagement ring, reported lost days earlier, had resurfaced, found by a maid in the study's wastebasket, its diamond glinting accusingly. Was Clara a victim, a suspect, or both? The twist deepened suspicion, as her presence in the study seemed increasingly likely. Another complication arose when Hastings, exploring the manor's upper floors, discovered a hidden key beneath a hallway rug, its shape matching the study's lock. "A duplicate!" he exclaimed, rushing to Poirot. Testing it, Poirot confirmed it unlocked the study door, raising a troubling question. Had the killer planted it to confuse the investigation, or had Sir Reginald himself kept a spare? The key's discovery muddied the locked room mystery, suggesting an alternate entry method, yet its placement, so conveniently found, smelled of deception. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This key, it is too perfect, Hastings. A clever mind wishes to lead us astray." The investigation took a darker turn with Dr. Victor Langston. A gardener, questioned discreetly, revealed Langston had been seen near the study's exterior window shortly before midnight, carrying a small tool, perhaps a wire. This aligned with Poirot's theory about the scratched window bolt, manipulated to create the locked room illusion. When confronted, Langston's calm cracked. "I was checking the grounds for a guest's lost item," he said, but his refusal to meet Poirot's gaze hinted at more. Digging deeper, Poirot uncovered a scandal from Langston's past. A patient's death in London, tied to an overdose, which Sir Reginald had threatened to expose. Had the doctor silenced his accuser? Lady Eleanor Hawthorne complicated matters further. A butler overheard her arguing with Sir Reginald days before, over a clause in their father's will that favoured him. "You've kept me a prisoner to this estate," she'd snapped. Now, Poirot learned she'd consulted a solicitor about contesting the will, a move that would only succeed with Sir Reginald's death. Her vague alibi, reading an unnamed book, grew shakier. and her poised exterior seemed a mask for desperation. Yet her openness about the argument puzzled Poirot. Was she too forthright to be guilty? Mr. Julian Travers, the stockbroker, faced new scrutiny when Poirot found a crumpled note in Sir Reginald's desk, scrawled in Travers's hand. "I'll make it right. Give me time." It suggested a plea to delay exposure of his financial missteps. Travers, sweating under questioning, admitted begging Sir Reginald for leniency. "He was furious," Travers confessed, "but I didn't kill him." His panic was palpable, but Poirot wondered if it was a performance to deflect suspicion. To test his theories, Poirot staged a reenactment, locking himself in the study with Hastings outside. Using a thin wire, he manipulated the window bolt from within, confirming it could be locked from outside with skill. "Voila!" he said, emerging. "The impossible becomes possible." The technique required precision, pointing to a killer with steady hands, perhaps Langston's medical expertise, or Colonel Marcus Reed's military training. Yet Mrs. Beatrice Fowler's knowledge of the manor's nooks, honed over decades, couldn't be dismissed. The reenactment clarified the method but not the culprit, adding complexity to the puzzle. A final twist came from Clara Beaumont. A footman reported seeing her slip into the library before the murder, near the crimson-waxed candle. When Poirot pressed her, she admitted retrieving a script from the library, but denied touching the candle. The orchid petal, the carpet fibres, and now the candle tied her to the crime scene. Yet her fear seemed genuine. Was she being framed, or was her charm a calculated facade? As the day waned, Shadow Court's halls seemed to close in, each suspect's secrets tightening the knot of suspicion. Poirot stood by the study window, gazing at the scratched bolt, his mind racing. "The killer plays a dangerous game," he told Hastings, "weaving truth and lies, but every lie leaves a trace." The duplicate key, the threatening letter, the wire, these were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. Chapter 6. The Revelation. The sun dipped below the Sussex hills, casting long shadows over Shadow Court as Hercule Poirot summoned the household to the drawing-room. The air was thick with anticipation, the grandeur of the manor now a backdrop to a grim reckoning. The suspects, Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, Dr. Victor Langston, Miss Clara Beaumont, Mr. Julian Travers, Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, and Echizu Colonel Marcus Reed, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a mosaic of fear, defiance, and curiosity. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the fireplace, his notebook forgotten, his eyes fixed on Poirot. The detective's small frame radiated authority, his moustache impeccable, his gaze piercing. "Mes amis," he began, his voice a velvet blade, "the truth of Sir Reginald Hawthorne's murder lies before us, and the little grey cells have woven it clear. The killer is in this room." Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. The crime appeared impossible. A locked study, a dagger in the heart, a key in the victim's pocket. Yet every puzzle has its solution. Let us unravel the threads. He began with the locked room, the heart of the mystery. The scratched window bolt, he explained, was the key to the illusion. A thin wire, inserted through a crack in the frame, could lock the bolt from outside, creating the appearance of an impenetrable room. This required precision, a steady hand, and knowledge of the manor's quirks. He turned to the clues. The red wax smudge on the desk, matching the library candle, was no accident. The killer used the candle to heat the wire, softening the bolt's mechanism for manipulation. A careless drop left the smudge. A mistake. The half-burned letter, with its fragments of debts and betrayal, pointed to a motive, while its later threat to Clara, she must not know, suggested a deeper secret. The orchid petal, the carpet fibres, and Clara's missing ring found in the wastebasket were distractions, as was the duplicate key under the rug. "These," Poirot said, "were planted to confuse, to point fingers elsewhere." The suspects stirred, their glances darting. Poirot's eyes settled on Dr. Victor Langston, who stiffened. "The killer," Poirot declared, "is you, Doctor." A gasp rippled through the room. Langston's face paled, but he remained silent, his hands gripping his chair. Poirot continued, his voice steady, unravelling the deduction with surgical precision. "Consider the motives," he said. "Lady Eleanor resented her brother's control over the inheritance, but her argument was public, too open for a murderer's cunning. Mr. Travers's financial ruin was desperate, yet his note begged for time, not violence. Colonel Reed's debts drove him to anger, but his bluster lacked the subtlety of this crime. Mrs. Fowler's grudge was deep, but her loyalty to the manor held firm. Miss Beaumont's ambition depended on Sir Reginald's life, not his death. Her ring, a planted clue, was meant to implicate her. Langston, Poirot explained, had the strongest motive. Sir Reginald uncovered your past, a patient's death by overdose, a scandal that would ruin you. The burned letter was his draft to expose you, a secret you could not allow. The doctor's medical expertise made him adept with sedatives, confirmed by the vial in his bag. You laced Sir Reginald's brandy, Poirot said, rendering him drowsy, easy to stab with the jewelled dagger, which you wiped clean. The locked room method was Langston's masterpiece. As a physician, you have steady hands. You used a wire, heated by the library candle, to lock the bolt from outside, leaving the key in Sir Reginald's pocket to complete the illusion. The wax smudge was your error, linking you to the library. The gardener's sighting of Langston near the window, carrying a tool, sealed the timeline. You entered the study at 10, sedated Sir Reginald, stabbed him, and exited, locking the room by 11. Clara's scream at midnight came after you planted the ring and petal to frame her. Poirot addressed the red herrings. The duplicate key, hidden under the rug, was Langston's attempt to suggest another entry method, deflecting from the window. The orchid petal and carpet fibres implicated Clara, a distraction from his own guilt. The letter's threat to Clara was a misdirection. Sir Reginald had written it to warn her of Langston's danger, not to threaten her. You burned it, Poirot said, but not thoroughly enough. Langston's voice was hoarse. You have no proof. Poirot smiled. The wax on your cufflinks, Doctor, matches the library candle. The wire, found in your medical bag, bears traces of the bolt's metal, and your shoes, faint traces of study carpet, unnoticed until now. The room fell silent, the weight of evidence crushing. Langston slumped, his confession spilling out. He would have destroyed me. I had no choice. Poirot's gaze softened, but his tone was firm. There is always a choice, monsieur. Murder is not the answer. The police, waiting in the hall, stepped forward to arrest Langston, his head bowed as he was led away. The household exhaled, the tension breaking like a storm's end. Clara wept, not for love, but relief. Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, her inheritance secure. Travers vowed reform, while Reed and Fowler stood in sombre silence. Chapter 7. Justice Served. As twilight draped Shadow Court in a soft violet haze, the grand manor seemed to exhale, its oppressive shadows lifting with the unmasking of Sir Reginald Hawthorne's killer. The drawing-room, where Hercule Poirot had revealed Dr. Victor Langston as the murderer, now held a quieter gathering. The suspects, Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, Miss Clara Beaumont, Mr. Julian Travers, Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, and Colonel Marcus Reed, sat in subdued silence, the weight of truth settling over them. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the window, watched the last rays of sunlight fade, his admiration for Poirot's brilliance undimmed. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice a soothing melody. The little grey cells have brought order to chaos. Justice, it is served. Dr. Langston's confession had been stark, his composure crumbling under Poirot's relentless logic. Sir Reginald knew of my disgrace, he'd admitted, his voice hollow. A patient's death, years ago, an accident, but he would have ruined me. The sedative-laced brandy, the jewelled dagger, the manipulated window bolt, all were tools of a desperate man. As the police led him away, handcuffs glinting in the lamplight, Langston's head bowed, a fallen figure against the manor's grandeur. Poirot watched, his expression unreadable. The human heart, he mused to Hastings, it hides many secrets, but none escape the truth. The household began to unravel its tangled emotions. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, now sole heir to Shadow Court, stood by the fireplace, her sharp features softened by relief. The inheritance, once a source of bitter resentment, was hers, yet she spoke with unexpected humility. Reginald was not a kind brother, she said, her voice low, but I wished him no harm. Poirot nodded, sensing her sincerity. Her vague alibi and open disputes had been missteps, not malice, and she vowed to honour the estate with charity, perhaps to atone for past rancour. Miss Clara Beaumont, her actress's poise restored, announced her departure for London. The engagement ring, planted to frame her, had been a cruel twist, but Poirot's revelation cleared her name. I loved him, in my way, she told Hastings, her eyes glistening, but I see now it was the life, not the man. Her ambition, once a motive, now seemed a fleeting dream. Poirot, ever gallant, wished her well, noting privately to Hastings, her heart, it seeks the stage, not the shadows. Mr. Julian Travers, the stockbroker, sat with head in hands, his financial ruin exposed, but his innocence confirmed. The ledgers and desperate note had painted him guilty, yet his panic was born of shame, not murder. I'll make amends, he vowed, his voice earnest. No more risks. Poirot's gentle admonition, honesty, monsieur, is the better investment, prompted a sheepish nod. Travers's departure was marked by a resolve to rebuild, his nervous energy tempered by hope. Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, the housekeeper, lingered in the background, her severe demeanour softened by grief. The dismissal of her son years ago had fuelled her bitterness, but Poirot's questions revealed her loyalty to Shadow Court ran deeper. I served him, despite it all, she said, her hands smoothing her apron. Poirot, with a rare warmth, praised her dedication, dispelling the curse she'd whispered of. The manor endures, madame, because of you, he said, and she offered a faint, grateful smile. Colonel Marcus Reed, his military bluster subdued, raised a glass to Sir Reginald's memory. His gambling debts and heated words had cast suspicion, but his presence near the study was merely ill-timed, a quest for a cigar, not a crime. He was a hard man, but a friend, Reed said gruffly. Poirot, sensing the colonel's regret, advised honour him with discipline, not dice. Reed's nod suggested a lesson learned. His debts a burden he'd face squarely. With the case closed, Poirot and Hastings retired to the terrace, where a late afternoon tea awaited. The Sussex hills stretched before them, serene and untouched by the manor's drama. Hastings, sipping his tea, marvelled aloud. How do you do it, Poirot? The wax, the wire, the petal, all so tangled, yet you saw the truth. Poirot smiled, his eyes twinkling. The little grey cells, mon ami, they see what the heart conceals. Order and method, these are my tools. He gestured to the landscape. Like these hills, the truth has its contours, waiting to be mapped. The manor's guests prepared to depart, their secrets laid bare, their motives resolved. Shadow Court, once a stage for deception, now stood as a testament to Poirot's genius. The police report was filed, the dagger secured as evidence, and the study's locked door no longer a mystery. As the final car rolled down the drive, Poirot adjusted his tie, his work complete. "Another chapter closes, Hastings," he said, "but the world, it holds many mysteries yet." The terrace fell silent, save for the soft clink of teacups and the rustle of leaves. Shadow Court, its shadows dispelled, awaited new stories, but for now it rested under Poirot's watchful gaze. Chapter 8. Echoes of Truth. As the first light of a new day crept over the Sussex hills, Shadow Court stood bathed in a gentle mist, its ivy-clad towers softened by the dawn. The turmoil of Sir Reginald Hawthorne's murder had subsided. The killer, Dr. Victor Langston, taken away in handcuffs, his confession echoing through the manor's halls. Yet the resolution, though complete, left ripples in its wake, and Hercule Poirot, ever attuned to the human heart, lingered to observe the aftermath. Captain Arthur Hastings joined him in the library, where the fire's embers glowed faintly, and the air held a quiet reverence. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a soft cadence, "justice is served, but the truth, it leaves its echoes. We must listen to them." The household, fractured by suspicion, began to mend, each soul touched by the case in ways both subtle and profound. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, now mistress of Shadow Court, stood at the library's window, gazing at the gardens where the torn silk scarf, a red herring, had briefly misled the investigation. Her inheritance secured, she spoke with a newfound resolve. "I was wrong to harbour such bitterness," she confided to Poirot. Her sharp tongue softened. "Reginald's control stifled me, but I see now the estate is a trust, not a chain." She planned to open Shadow Court to the community, hosting charitable events to honour her brother's memory. Poirot nodded approvingly. "The heart, madame, finds peace in purpose," he said, sensing her transformation was genuine. Miss Clara Beaumont, the actress whose charm had masked ambition, prepared to leave for London, her bags packed with scripts and dreams. The planted engagement ring, meant to frame her, had shaken her confidence, but Poirot's unmasking of Langston restored her freedom. Over tea she admitted to Hastings, "I thought wealth would anchor me, but the stage is my true home." Her laughter, once calculated, now rang with sincerity. Poirot, ever gallant, offered a parting word. "Your talent, mademoiselle, will outshine any jewel." As her car vanished down the drive, Hastings remarked, "She'll dazzle the West End." Poirot smiled. "Oui, but the heart, it learns its true desires." Mr. Julian Travers, the stockbroker whose ledgers had betrayed his ruin, lingered in the study where Sir Reginald's body was found. The crumpled note pleading for time had exposed his failures, but Poirot's discernment spared him from false accusation. "I've been a fool," Travers told Poirot, his boyish face earnest, "but I'll rebuild honestly this time." He planned to sell his London flat to cover debts, a step toward redemption. Poirot's counsel was firm yet kind. "Trust, monsieur, is earned through truth, not promises." Travers nodded, his nervous fidgeting replaced by a quiet determination to start anew. Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, the housekeeper, moved through the manor with her usual efficiency, but her severe demeanour had softened. The bitterness over her son's dismissal, once a motive, now seemed a distant wound. In the kitchen she shared a rare moment with Poirot, offering him a scone baked with pride. "You saw through the curse nonsense," she said, her voice gruff but warm. "Shadow Court is my home, and I'll keep it standing." Poirot praised her loyalty, noting privately to Hastings, "Her heart is the manor's true foundation." Her apron, once stained with suspicious wax, now bore only flour, a symbol of her steadfast service. Colonel Marcus Reed, his military bluster tempered, stood on the terrace, sipping brandy in Sir Reginald's honour. His gambling debts and proximity to the study had cast suspicion, but his innocence was clear. He was a hard man, but loyal, Reed said, his ruddy face sombre. Poirot, joining him, advised, "Honour him by mastering your own battles, Colonel." Reed vowed to settle his debts, his soldier's resolve returning. As he saluted the hills, Poirot noted, "The past teaches, but the future redeems." Poirot and Hastings took a final walk through Shadow Court's gardens, where the orchid petal, another of Langston's deceptions, had sparked early theories. The scratched window bolt, the red wax, the burned letter, all were pieces of a puzzle now solved, yet Poirot reflected on the human cost. The killer sought to bury his shame, he told Hastings, but shame, it buries the soul. Hastings, ever in awe, asked, "How do you see it all, Poirot? The lies, the truths?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They listen to the silence between words." As they returned to the manor, the staff bustled, preparing for Lady Eleanor's first act as mistress, a memorial for Sir Reginald. The jewelled dagger, now evidence, was locked away, and the study's door stood open, its secrets aired. Shadow Court, once a stage for murder, now promised renewal. Poirot adjusted his tie, his work complete. "The truth, Hastings," he said. "It is a light that banishes shadows." The manor's gates creaked as Poirot and Hastings departed, the Sussex hills fading into dusk. Another mystery solved, another chapter closed, but Poirot's mind already turned to the next. Chapter 9. A New Dawn. The morning sun rose over Shadow Court, painting its ancient stonework in hues of gold and rose, as if the manor itself sought to shed the darkness of Sir Reginald Hawthorne's murder. The arrest of Dr. Victor Langston, unmasked by Hercule Poirot's relentless logic, had restored order. Yet the echoes of the case lingered, like whispers in the manor's halls. Poirot, preparing to depart, stood in the grand foyer, his impeccable suit and moustache a stark contrast to the emotional currents around him. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever his faithful companion, carried their bags, his face alight with admiration. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a gentle melody, "a mystery solved is a chapter closed, but life, it writes new pages. Let us see what Shadow Court holds now." The household, forever changed, gathered to bid farewell to the detective who had pierced their secrets. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, now the manor's mistress, stood with a quiet dignity, her widow's black softened by a cream scarf, a symbol of renewal. The inheritance dispute that had fueled suspicion was resolved, and she had begun plans to transform Shadow Court into a haven for local artists, a legacy for her brother. "You've given us clarity, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her sharp eyes warm. "This house will breathe again." Poirot bowed slightly. "A home, madame, thrives when its heart is open." Her smile, rare and genuine, spoke of a woman reclaiming her purpose. Miss Clara Beaumont had departed for London the previous evening, her actress's charm now tempered by self-awareness. A letter arrived for Poirot, penned in her elegant hand, thanking him for clearing her name. The planted engagement ring, meant to frame her, had been a harsh lesson, but she wrote of auditions awaiting her, her ambition redirected to the stage. "She'll shine," Hastings remarked, folding the letter. Poirot nodded. "The heart, it finds its true stage, mon ami." He suspected Clara's star would rise, unburdened by Shadow Court's shadows. Mr. Julian Travers, the stockbroker, was seen in the village, meeting with a solicitor to liquidate assets and settle his debts. His financial ruin, exposed by Sir Reginald's ledgers, had nearly branded him a murderer, but Poirot's discernment spared him. Travers sent a note of gratitude, promising a new path. "I'll deal in honesty now," he wrote. Poirot, reading it over breakfast, commented, "The man who falls and rises, Hastings, he is stronger for it." Travers's nervous energy seemed to have found a steadier course, a redemption born of truth. Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, the housekeeper, bustled through the manor, her apron crisp, her demeanour lighter. The bitterness over her son's dismissal had faded, replaced by a renewed commitment to Shadow Court. She approached Poirot with a small tin of homemade biscuits, a gesture of thanks. "You saw the truth, sir," she said, her voice gruff but kind. "This house is my family." Poirot accepted the gift with a smile. "Your loyalty, madame, is the manor's soul." Her role in the new Shadow Court, under Lady Eleanor's vision, promised continuity amidst change. Colonel Marcus Reed, his military bearing restored, had left for London to face his creditors, his gambling debts no longer a secret. His proximity to the study had cast suspicion, but Poirot's logic cleared him. At the station, Reed clasped Poirot's hand. "You've given me a chance to make things right," he said, his voice steady. Poirot's advice was simple. Discipline, Colonel, is a soldier's greatest ally. Reed's salute as he boarded the train hinted at a resolve to reclaim his honour. As Poirot and Hastings strolled the gardens one last time, a subtle new mystery stirred. A groundskeeper mentioned an odd discovery. A small locked box buried near the rose bush, where the torn scarf, a red herring, had been found. It bore Sir Reginald's initials, but no key was found. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Curieux," he murmured, choosing not to open it. "Some secrets, Hastings, belong to the past." Yet the box hinted at untold stories, perhaps for another day, another case. Hastings, intrigued, pressed for more, but Poirot smiled. "The little grey cells, they rest for now." The manor's staff prepared for Lady Eleanor's first event, a modest gathering to unveil her artistic vision. The study, once a scene of death, was now a library for visiting scholars, its locked door a memory. The jewelled dagger, red wax and orchid petal were catalogued as evidence, their roles in Langston's deception laid bare. Shadow Court, cleansed of its shadows, stood ready for a new dawn. Poirot and Hastings boarded their car, the manor receding behind them. "What a case, Poirot," Hastings said, the hills rolling past. "You saw through it all, the wire, the wax, the lies." Poirot's gaze was distant. "The truth, mon ami, is a light that finds its way. We merely guide it." As the car wound through the Sussex countryside, Shadow Court faded into the mist, its story complete, yet its future unwritten. The original specifications for Murder at the Shadow Court. A Hercule Poirot story outlined a story structure with 7 chapters, concluding with Chapter 7, Justice Served, with Chapters 8 and 9 added as epilogues. Since Chapter 10 was not specified, I'll craft Chapter 10, The Legacy of Shadow Court, as a final reflective chapter, serving as a poignant conclusion that ties together the themes of the case, explores the enduring legacy of Shadow Court, and hints at Poirot's next adventure, maintaining the classic Whodunit style. This chapter meets the requested 1,000-word length, with a warm, British-accented conversational narration, slow and deliberate pacing for relaxation, a sophisticated yet accessible tone, and the specified community engagement elements. Chapter 10, The Legacy of Shadow Court. As the sun dipped below the Sussex horizon, casting a golden glow over Shadow Court's ivy-clad towers, The manor stood as a silent witness to the unravelling of its darkest secret. The murder of Sir Reginald Hawthorne, solved by Hercule Poirot's inimitable little grey cells, had left the estate transformed, its shadows dispelled by truth. Dr. Victor Langston's arrest had closed the case, but the story of Shadow Court lingered, its legacy shaped by those who remained. Poirot, preparing to depart, stood in the grand foyer, his impeccable demeanour a beacon of calm. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at his side, gazed at the chandelier's prisms, reflecting on the case. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice a soft melody, "a mystery solved is a seed planted. Let us see what grows in Shadow Court's new dawn." The household, forever altered by the revelations, gathered for a final farewell to the detective who had pierced their secrets. Lady Eleanor Hawthorne, now the manor's guiding light, stood with a quiet grace, her plans to transform Shadow Court into an artistic haven taking shape. The inheritance that once fueled her resentment was now a tool for good. She shared with Poirot a sketch of a proposed gallery wing to house local artists' works. "This is Reginald's true legacy," she said, her voice steady. "Not wealth, but inspiration." Poirot bowed, his eyes warm. "You honour the past, madame, by building the future." Her resolve, he noted, had turned Shadow Court from a cage into a canvas. Miss Clara Beaumont, though gone to London, sent a telegram that arrived as Poirot sipped his morning tea. Her first audition had secured a lead role, her ambition finding its stage. The planted engagement ring, meant to ensnare her, was a distant memory, and her gratitude to Poirot shone through her words. "You freed my path." Hastings, reading the telegram, grinned. "She'll be a star, Poirot." The detective nodded. "The heart, mon ami, shines brightest when true to itself." Clara's journey, freed from Shadow Court's shadows, promised a brilliance all her own. Mr. Julian Travers, the stockbroker, had left for London with a renewed purpose. His financial ruin, exposed by Sir Reginald's ledgers, had nearly branded him a killer. But Poirot's clarity spared him. A letter from Travers, delivered to the manor, detailed his efforts to repay creditors by selling his assets. "I owe you my honour," he wrote. Poirot, sharing the letter with Hastings, remarked, "The man who rebuilds on truth, he stands taller than before." Travers's redemption, though hard-won, was a testament to the case's ripple effects. Mrs. Beatrice Fowler, the housekeeper, moved through the manor with a lighter step, her loyalty unshaken despite the pain of her son's dismissal years ago. She presented Poirot with a small embroidered handkerchief, a token of thanks. "You saw the manor's heart," she said, her gruff voice softened. "I'll keep it beating." Poirot accepted the gift with a rare smile. "Your devotion, madame, is Shadow Court's true treasure." Her role in Lady Eleanor's vision ensured the manor's legacy would endure, grounded in care. Colonel Marcus Reed, his military pride restored, had settled his gambling debts with a strict plan, inspired by Poirot's counsel. Before departing, he shared a brandy with the detective, his ruddy face thoughtful. "You showed me a mirror, Poirot," he said. "I didn't like what I saw, but I'll change it." Poirot's parting words were gentle. "A soldier's strength, Colonel, lies in facing his battles." Reed's firm handshake suggested a path toward redemption, his debts no longer a shadow. As Poirot and Hastings walked the manor's grounds, a final discovery stirred intrigue. A young maid clearing the study found a sealed envelope hidden in a book, a last note from Sir Reginald, addressed to Poirot. It read, "Should harm befall me, seek the box by the rose bush." The locked box found earlier remained unopened its secrets untouched. Poirot, intrigued, chose to leave it sealed. "Some truths, Hastings, are for another day," he said, his eyes glinting with the promise of future mysteries. Hastings, ever curious, protested, but Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The little grey cells, they know when to pause." The manor prepared for its first artistic event, a small gathering to unveil Lady Eleanor's vision. The study, once a tomb, now glowed with lamplight, its books open to scholars. The jewelled dagger, red wax and orchid petal were archived, their roles in Langston's deception a closed chapter. Shadow Court, reborn, stood as a beacon of renewal, its legacy woven from truth and transformation. As Poirot and Hastings climbed into their car, the manor's gates gleamed in the fading light. "What a case, Poirot," Hastings said, the hills rolling past. "You turned chaos into clarity." Poirot's gaze was distant. "The truth, mon ami, is a compass. It guides through the darkest storms." As Shadow Court vanished into the mist, Poirot's mind turned to the next mystery, his little grey cells ever ready,